Thanks. Great crowd this morning. We just wanted to open up and open with a word of prayer from Pastor Craig.
If you don't mind, I'm not going to just say a little perfunctory prayer, whatever that means. I want us to really spend a few moments together seeking the Lord. We're going to practice what we've been hearing about. Okay, so if you would bow your heads, and I'm going to lead you in prayer. But as I said, it's not going to be just a moment or two like we normally do. Let's let this be a time when we really are interceding with the Lord. Lord Jesus, as we come before you on this beautiful Sunday morning, and the privilege that we have as a church to have moments like this, which I think could and should be a paradigm moment for us, I am thankful and I praise you for the privilege that we have of knowing that you desire to be in relationship with us, and that you desire to do mighty and powerful things through this body of believers called Prairie Bible Church. Lord, listen to our hearts as we take a moment to cry out to you and say thank you. As we say thanks, Jesus, we also cry out from the burdens in our hearts, from the things that we heard today during the prayer time, of people who are having surgery, people who are struggling in life, people that weren't even mentioned during the prayer time, but we are holding in our hearts. We ask Jesus that in these next few moments that you would hear these concerns as we lay them at the foot of the cross. Lord, I ask that you would hear us this morning as I'm going to ask that we see this meeting more as a prayer meeting, as a prayer gathering, and that the things that are shared, as they are being shared, we will see them as are lifting these concerns, these issues, these circumstances of life up to you, believing that in your hands it's all good, believing that in your hands you will guide and direct us, believing that in your hands the perfect solution, the perfect resolution will come to mind and will come before us. When we approach you with that kind of an attitude, believing that you are the God of possibilities, believing that you can take all things and work them to the good, believing that no matter what the circumstance of life, we win because you already won. It is all good, and for that we give you praise. So we thank you. I thank you this morning, Lord, for all the work that has been done to bring us to this place. I thank you and ask your blessing upon those that invested time and energy and skill and talent to bring us to the place we are today. And I pray that as we humble ourselves before you as a church, as the church, your church, that your perfect purpose and plan would be fulfilled, and we would be wise and humble enough to want that too. So thank you, Jesus, for loving us. Thank you for calling us on this great adventure. And as we've said almost from the very beginning, we know that it's going to be wild, and it's going to be crazy sometimes, and it's always going to be full of you. We pray these things in Jesus' name. And everybody said, Amen.
All right. Thank you, Craig. We have some exciting updates to share with you. And Ryan, if you want to go to the first slide there. First off, I'll be starting to talk through where we're at with the land search. As you know, we've been working on that really since the beginning of the year, and so we've got some updates we'll share there. And then Tom's going to go through the actual details of where we're at currently on the building design, as well as the cost. Just so you know up front, is the costs are not yet where we need them to be. So we're not coming with a proposal today, we're just coming to give you an update. And really, this is a long process, a lot of steps. So we're kind of at the step now where we have the majority of the design finalized, and now we really want to work on how we reduce costs. So we're committed as a steering committee. The 20-person building review committee is committed, and we're working closely with the architects and with our general contractor, but we really need your inputs too as we go forward today from here in terms of, hey, here's some areas where we can potentially bring costs down, some different approaches. So please try to make this an interactive session this morning. We want your feedback. That just helps guide us forward. So first off, kind of our journey, where we're been. It's back March 10th, so almost 7 months ago that we really came together as a group. At that time we gathered in here over pizza, had over 60 people attend that vision meeting. Some excellent inputs, a lot of thoughts about kind of the hopes and dreams of where Prairie Bible should go. And the net of that was, we've got the indication from that meeting that we should move forward into a building investigation phase. So I just wanted to spend just a couple minutes here just talking about really what we decided at that vision meeting. The first and foremost, we're not focused on a building, but it's about having a permanent home to worship God in and a way for us to help spread the ministry to this area. We wanted to keep true to kind of our DNA of a simple, authentic church. We felt that was critical. We really wanted to try to reach the unchurched in the area. So we know that the area that we're focused in is growing quickly, but we also know there's a lot of unchurched people in this area, and we really feel that's God's calling for us as Prairie Bible. Being in this area, we've got a big college just, less than a mile from here, so we wanted to stay in the area and really do a ministry outreach to Kirkwood. And, finally kind of focus on being a church for others, because I think one of the most important things to remember, it's not about us, it's not about what we want, but it's about what God's bigger plan is. So with that, let's go right into the site update here. So you've seen this chart before. I think we probably first showed it back in February timeframe as we've been looking at the land. Just to get you acclimated, on the left-hand side is 380. On the top is Highway 30. And so if you come down to the blue G there, kind of in the bottom left-hand side, that's what we call the Jardine property. And that's actually just about a mile straight south of the Prairie Hill School here. So we've been working on that for a long time. We actually made a kind of a non-binding offer to the owner of that land. He was asking $87,500 an acre for it and wanted us to buy 10 acres because he's got 32 acres there, and he didn't want to go lower than 10 acres. We offered him substantially less and some other conditions around it. One of those being is that we would actually have to build a road. The city requires you to build roads depending on your location. We thought this site would actually require us to have to spend up to $200,000 on a road. So we asked him to bear the cost of that. And he basically came back and said, I'm not reducing my price, I'm not paying for the road. And so we took that as a sign that this wasn't the right spot for us. So we've effectively crossed that off our list. At the same time, we basically found out about a new property up here. If you see in the green, it's Metro Paver property. So there's both the green and the yellow. The yellow is the Servicec property, which we've been talking about for a while. So this is over on C Street, I think about a mile and a half south of Highway 30. So it's a good location, good, right on the highway. Traffic counts 2,500 cars a day in there, so it's a high area. If you don't know, it's kind of like directly across from McLeod, Transamerica, Ruffalo, Cody, right in that area. So those are the two spots we're talking about, and I'll just show you quickly kind of the highlights of where we're at today on them. Now again, we're at the point where we've talked with both the owners, we're continually meeting, but we're not ready to bring a proposal forward. The first one, the Metro Paver site, which is on the west side of C Street, that is in city limits, whereas the Servicec farm is not in city limits. And the big difference there is when you're not in city limits, you basically have to have both. When we're that close to the city limits, you have to be permitted by both the city and the county. So there's some additional requirements that would be required there. Utility connection fee In the Metro Paver site, since it's in city limits, everything's there. On the Servicek farm, we'd have to put in our own septic system. We could get hooked up to city water, but we'd have to pay to bring it across the road, bore underneath the road and hook it up, as well as natural gas. And rough estimates on that cost is around $100,000. Parcel size, we assumed 8 acres. Now that's not fixed, but that's what we assumed on the Metro Paver site. And we said 10 acres on the Servicek just because we'll need additional space for our septic field. Cost per acre, and these are we've had discussions with them. This is their current asking price, but we really haven't gotten into a negotiation phase with them. It's $60,000 for Metro Paver and $55,000 for Servicek Farm. So you can see the total cost there, $480 and $650. And again, we could reduce the size of the land so that, again, we aren't hard and fast on that, but we did want to make sure that we had adequate land so that future expansions we wouldn't be landlocked. So Tom will be next, but I just want to stop there. I should say, too, we're continuing to look for other land. We'd really like to stay in this area. That was one of the criteria we set up originally, that we wanted to be close in this area, but we're staying open. And if there's other options that people are aware of, let us know about that. But these are currently the 2 sites we're looking at. So, questions? Everybody wants to see the building stuff from Tom. So.
Oh, did you want to hit the financial marker? I can do that too. As far as cost?
Oh, yep. Sorry about that.
Didn't matter
I forgot
to me.
run through that.
Sure.
Yeah, the last item is, there's been a lot of questions about, well, how much money are we, or how much of a loan do we really want to take on? How are we going to handle things? So as an admin board, we talked through this idea of a 1/3, 1/3, 1/3. And effectively what that means is that when you go into a project, before you do a formal kickoff on it, you'd have 1/3 cash in the bank, you'd have 1/3 in pledges for the capital campaign, and then another third of it would be unpledged. So as an example, let's say the project rolled up to be $2.7 million. What that means is then you need to have $900,000 cash in the bank before you kick the project off. You need to have $900,000 in additional pledges beyond that cash that you already have in the bank, and then $900,000 in unpledged loans. I mean, that does mean that you have $1.8 million in loan, but obviously you're paying down that as your capital campaign funds come in, for the pieces that are pledged. So that's just kind of a quick example, but we want to make sure that we don't become a church about money and have to, we're not planning to go into heavy debt. We've heard from multiple places, like I say, the admin board felt this 1/3, 1/3, 1/3 approach is the right way for us to proceed. Any questions on that? All right.
Anybody want to cover one of those 1/3s right now? We won't get to, you don't get a yes unless you ask a question. I thought I'd at least ask the question. To give you a quick synopsis again of where we're at from a building standpoint. I know everybody, I think everybody wants to see the picture and see some of the pictures we've got, and they are really neat pictures. Just as a real basic background of it, the floor plan, and I'm going to show that a little bit, and some of the floor plan layout and what we have and why, is coming from that vision meeting we had back in March that Mark talked about, and kind of a priority matrix that we as a steering and review committee put together of what are kind of the minimums that we would want to have space-wise, how many people do we want to seat, what kind of bathrooms do we need in classrooms, what's our minimum, and what can we do from there. So we kind of use that a lot there. The steering committee also did a lot of tours. I think we talked about that last time we were together. We went and looked at half a dozen different churches and or facilities that would match about the same size and scope so we could get an idea of what we're looking at, and looking ultimately at style. And those are kind of the guiding principles of what we wanted, from a simple and authentic and open, very well lit, just kind of simple and beautiful space, but yet not glamorous. To hit what we were wanting for, welcoming to other people, again, to be that church for others. That's kind of the purpose and the principles we had as we were going through this. It's tough maybe for everybody to see, but this is the initial floor plan that we've got put together. I'm going to go through this a little bit, and if you notice, I'm going to try to continue to say this morning, initial. This is just one step in our journey and our process. Where this leads in the next week, month, year, only God knows, and we just hope and pray He keeps showing us along the way. And we look at the floor plan. The front door is off to the left. That's the main entrance off to here. And there's kind of this label is gathering space right down the middle that opens up into the sanctuary. I'm actually going to kind of start in the back then and work to the front. The sanctuary being on the right-hand side with just open floor space. It's not an auditorium. Those are just, idea would be folding chairs. Maybe a little bit nicer folding chairs? Yeah, but still folding chairs right now on a concrete floor, so it's an open space. We can take those chairs up and let kids play on Wednesday or Friday or whatever the case might be, but it'd be enough space that we could put 250 chairs up. For frame of reference, there's about 130 chairs set up right now this morning. So almost double we would have the space for there. You can see at the very front a small stage. I don't know if that pointer really works well, but a small stage is drawn in there, and then on either side of the stage are just some storage areas. I mean, they'd be walled off. There'd be a big storage closet. We got to remember, and nobody's built a house, building, office, anything that's ever had too much storage, right? So we got to have a little bit of that, but that's up front. There is basically a wall between the sanctuary and the gathering space. And we'll see as we get into some of the 3D drawings, and you'll see in there we also have glass so that it's not closed off to try to keep that open, welcoming feel. But there's doors in there. The big space on the left is the gathering space, and it is just strictly that. And from our feedback, what we've heard, seen from others, is that's as much about meeting people, welcoming people, sharing with them about Christ. No offense, Craig, but the sermon's good, but what we can do before and after the sermon is maybe just as much important. So it's almost the same size. And as you come in, I don't know if this pointer works, you come in and to the left, the idea would we could have kind of the coffee bar or the fellowship area with snacks and those kinds of things, some tables and chairs to people could gather. On the bottom, at the end of the side, down here, even maybe as a couch or two, just to have that casual, welcoming space that way. The bottom left in the picture are the bathrooms that we've got to have, and those dictated just how many and how big based off of the size of the building and how many people. So that's pretty straightforward. The top left, there's basically 3 rooms there. The very top left, off to the corner, is got listed as Sunday school meeting space. It's a fairly large conference room. I'm not going to call it a classroom, but a fairly large conference room, basically, for 10 to 12 people. The one in the middle has got prayer room. And if anything, we continue to just even get closer and closer to a focus of prayer from a church standpoint and to dedicate that room. Not that we can't be praying in that whole 70 by 120 space, but also have a prayer room dedicated for it. And then you can see the nursery kind of with the colorful squares in there, but a little space for kids. And in our opinion and from what we've heard from everyone is, especially when we're welcoming others, if we want families and others to come in, they want to make sure that their kids are secure and safe and comfortable, and we want to make sure we have a dedicated space for them. I'm going to go through some 3D drawings so we can see it in different perspectives. If you got major questions, let me know. We'll stop any time through this, but we can always come back to it as well. Here's a rendering of the outside, and I promise I did not put all the plants on the outside of the picture. But it does look kind of nice, doesn't it? That's the outside scope of what it would be. Right now, with the simple one roof line, you can see the porches on the side. That's the main entrance looking in it. Here's walking in the front door. This is, again, going into that gathering space. You just walk in the front door. You can see the gathering space there. You can look through the hall, if you will, to the windows, to the wall separating the gathering to the sanctuary, and you can see all the way up to the front. You see the clear span just to keep it open and welcoming and lit. And while it's not a barn, just even having the exposed trusses and that high ceilings, we think it kind of gives a little bit of that simple feel and nice feel. Then on the right and the left is the bathrooms as you're coming in. Now I think I'm going to spin around. Yeah, this is basically looking back at the front door, just so you can get a picture of what that front door area kind of looks like. And again, to try to keep it open, the high ceilings help, but the idea right now is to have that glass front so that it lets a lot of light in and it's natural lit and gives it that nice feel. Hopefully it's noticeable, and I don't have to point it out, but I'm going to go ahead and point it out here, but the architect has even put a cross in the glass in the front and the back of that too as well. Yeah, the plant needs help. I'm an outside plant guy, not an inside. How about that? Back to again, we come in the front door, kind of walk through where it would be. You come off to the left, you can see the glass into the children's space. This is more designed as nursery, but that all varies, and obviously these are spaces that we can change and adjust. But to come in there and have a space right now with the idea of even having a little sink and a counter space that could be used and lit, windows to the outside. Here's a prayer room. I've got a label on the top. The architect's got this. And again, these are architect Solom Lang. Nothing that we've put together, but they've done a great job of just rendering all this for us to see. It's the idea of what a prayer room would be with the window to the out and kind of a nice space to be able to go with small groups. And here's the conference room right there in the corner that we could have meetings in, have a Bible study, have a prayer meeting, whatever the case might be for space that we would want in there. This is, again, as you're coming in the main entrance to the gathering space and off to the right or to the bottom of that floor plan what it was. Just before you get to the sanctuary, right now they're just showing with potential for maybe some couches. If you were to go around this corner and down here, that's the bathroom hallway down that side. But that would be there, again, just open space for communication. You look outside, you see the glass and the door to the outside, that's kind of the patio space. That right now on the plan is just to have an outdoor simple patio. It's got a roof, so it'd be covered. Is that a place that there's kids out there during service even, and we're meeting for Sunday school, or have coffee and things outside on those nice days, even have a picnic, lunch, that kind of thing could be really neat. And so it's on there for that option. And again, this is the other side, kind of we're against the wall, some cabinets for coffee bar, drinks, snacks, a sink. We haven't, hopefully it's enough there that we've got enough space for storage and those kind of things makes it pretty easy to keep. Nothing elaborate, but to accomplish everything we're doing now. Moving into the sanctuary space, concrete floor, high ceilings, open, with the chairs there. There would be an AV space just to have the sound, but otherwise it would be all movable with the chairs there. It's another angle of what it looks like. You can see off the front and right sides of the stage, kind of the open walls here. Those are, again, the storage spaces, but also then maybe gives us a spot to put screens on either side of the stage. So we can have screens for music and AV. And then here's a shot looking back at it, again with those exposed beams and the cathedral look to it. The windows on the outside looking in. And so many details here, and I don't want to point out a lot of things, but we got windows on the sides, and there's also kind of windows up higher too, just to try to get some of that natural light in. And then just another shot of the outside. Yes, Terry. Do you want, sorry, well, go ahead, I'll repeat the question. Question is on, I'm going to say other spaces for youth, for instance, middle youth and high school youth, and where would they go, where would they have space for them? I'm going to just come back to the floor plan, and I'm going to reiterate, and I think those are great questions that we need to talk about. I want to go through one more quick fly through too, and we can go into detail and question for as long as we want to and need to. The really short answer is, we've got the budgets I'm going to present here in just a second, and we're over budget. And what our steering committee believes and what the review committee believes is a capable and accomplishable goal. So right now, we just got to make choices. Where does God see us and need us to focus right now versus where we can go in the future? And how do we multi-purpose them? So the question is middle youth and high school youth, which right now are not meeting on Sunday morning when we're meeting. And this space, the sanctuary space, is every bit as big as this space. And when the chairs are out, maybe that's where the high school and the middle youth are meeting. Even during a Sunday school, during service, when the kids go out, and right now they go to a gym, they got a bigger space than we've got right now. Are they going to be able to maybe meet in that little conference room? Are they going to maybe have one or two in the nursery? Are they going to end up sitting on the floor here and welcoming any guests that come in late? Who knows? And those are things that we've got to understand and realize that, it's not everything that we want. It's just everything that we maybe need. And that's where we're going to go. But that's the space question. Jim? Does Craig have an office? Yes, right down here. This is the men's restroom right down here. Craig had said from the very beginning, he doesn't need an office. It's not about giving him a nice corner office. Not to put words in his mouth, but he said that. Ideally, if we can get some office space, even just to store files and important documents and things, we wanted that and be able to lock that up, which the conference room could allow for. But to have an office for Craig at this point, no, not necessarily. That's exactly right. Well, I get the bathroom. What more does he need? What I want to do, I don't want to limit the questions. I want to come back to this. I do want to, in case somebody, understandably, if people need to sneak out, I want to go through a little bit and get the numbers out there, and then we'll take as much time as we need to for questions. And, I mean, handle a couple of them, but if we can at least go through some of this real quick. I want to point out, this was not something we did, but as a building committee or a steering committee review it all, but just to show you that our architects are trying to listen. The contractor we're working with wants to hear us. Anybody read what's on the banners there? We didn't say this. They're putting together the renderings. All of a sudden, they're showing us these pictures, and we picked up on it. So they're listening. They're trying to help follow what we want to do and where we want to be. Oh, sorry. It is simple, authentic Jesus. Those are the three words on that banner. And then they put together just a quick fly-through. It's about a 2-minute video, just as if you're walking through the space. It's the same pictures, but it does give it a different perspective. And you get to see the flowers again. It's amazing what technology can do, isn't it? Now, I want to run through budget costs, where we're at. Through a design build process, we work with Solon Lang Architects to put everything together you just saw there. We're working with Rinderneck and Associates to be our general contractor to be able to help construct this at some point when along the journey we are ready to move forward with construction. They have gone through and priced out what we just looked at and what that would take for us to do. We've got some budget numbers. This is for land. What we're looking at that Mark just talked about. Then we've got site work. Once we actually own the land, to do the dirt work, to put everything together for it, to do everything outside of the building, to put the parking lot in. I don't know if everybody can read that back there, but to build a retention pond, which is required by city code, to put the parking lot in, to put the sidewalks in, to put even the grass and the trees in, the most important part. And you can see what the dollar is for that. Then to just build a building, the actual building construction, the framing, the masonry, the roof, the siding, the shingles, the flooring, plumbing, the electrical, and you can see where the dollar comes in. Can everybody see that in the back? Would it be better? Land being at $500,000. Site work, everything outside the building, the parking lots, etc., being about $700,000. The building itself basically $2 million to build the structure that we just looked at there. Then you've got fees on top of that from city code and permitting to pay for the contractor, to pay the architect at about $300,000. And then just to furnish it. Those extra chairs and those nicer chairs we want, they're going to cost something too, and we put in a line item with audiovisual and the chairs and the other furnishings at about $100,000. Ultimately, it's about $3,600,000, $700,000 project to buy land, to put it all together. We put this together as a building steering committee. We've been watching this through the whole process. And our initial budgets on some of these things, and then where we finally come in, right to now, at this point in our journey. And as Mark said, we were really gearing towards about a $2.5 million project, and that's what our hope was, and we thought that that could be a potential. Where we're at today, and where we think is really good with the beautiful drawings, is at about that 3.7. And now the question is, where do we look? What do we adjust? How do we need to move forward? Where does God see us leading this to make sure we're getting what Prairie Bible Church needs in this area? And how do we move forward with those things? And that's where I wanted to go, is now I think, unless we can, I wanted to get that out in case somebody does need to sneak out. They've at least seen that stuff. We can go through more detail. But now, any questions we can hit? Go ahead, Terry. Terry's question was on the entryway. It's a large entryway, and do we need that big entryway? I'm gonna go back and be able to kind of hit on some of those things, and we can talk through that, either the floor plan or the 3Ds, depending on how people want it. The large entryway, it's a good question. Part of the question is, how big does that gathering space need to be? Whether it's the entry and or they kind of go to the sides. How big should it be? That's a great question, and direct feedback to any and everybody involved here would be good. The concept is that there's as much time spent outside of the actual service area as there is inside, whether that's just greeting people and being welcoming or coffee and et cetera. And so how big that needs to be is a good question. And can we shrink it up? That's all discussions we've got to have, but we're trying to keep it welcoming that way.
Yeah, maybe one other comment too is, take the laser pointer for a second, just in terms of the size of that entry. So future expansion, what the architect said is you really never, in future expansion, don't want to move your front door. They said everything is associated to that. So I guess you can't see on this, but if you see the entry on that left, you come in there in the gathering space. Essentially where the expansion could be is it could go up towards the top out of the gathering space, or go down towards the bottom, or we could extend out the worship space. But in future expansions, you'd still be coming into that gathering, that entryway in the same gathering space. So you want to make sure you don't shrink that up too much just for the future, because obviously that'll be locked down.
Other questions? Yeah, Mark, you want to maybe carry the microphone?
Sure.
Terry?
Everybody loves talking in the microphone.
Terry.
First, on? No.
Yeah, there you go.
Yes.
You're on.
First, what happened to the committee's agreement that this would basically be based on a barn? And second, how many churches has this architect designed?
Good questions. One is the barn question is a question that we went to in a couple of different ways. One is we actually did do a really concept idea amongst our steering committee of looking at a barn, an actual barn, and to get a barn gambrel roof like the one we had made in before. The really simple idea is basically the barn is going to be as tall as it is wide to get that shape, if that makes sense. And my dad's barn is about 35 feet wide, if you look at the end of it, and it's 35 feet tall. Right now, this space is 70 feet wide, just to get the floor space we want. And nobody thought it made sense to have a 70-foot tall structure to get that shape. So then we said, well, can we go to 2 stories, just like the barn is? And then you start talking about having an elevator and stairs and adding a lot of square footage for stairs and elevators as well as cost. And we didn't take it any farther than that because of that. what we tried to do then is say, can we incorporate some styles in a barn into a non-barn roof line with the exposed trusses, with the simple exterior look? Well, it's not true gambrel barn. Does it at least have some rural feel to it? That was our hope. Now, that may be a personal preference. It isn't true with everybody, but that's what our guide was. Your second question about architects, Solom Lang has done multiple churches, Rinderneck as well. If we are picking an architect or a builder from Cedar Rapids, I would venture to say no other architect or contractor in town has built more churches than those two. They have designed the most and built the most. You have another question? Do we have another mic, Ryan? Another non?
Are there any, I'll call it church contractors? Okay.
Sure it's on.
Are there any
Terry?
church contractors out there that you contacted?
We talked with, Mark specifically, I don't know if you want to hit on, we were talking to Grace Church in North Liberty. They are in the beginning stages of design. I don't know what stages, I shouldn't say that. They're in the process at some form or fashion of adding on or adjusting and redesigning their church. And they are working with a church-exclusive designer from the Twin Cities, who we talked with as well as a potential, as we were hiring and interviewing architects. And they do all sizes, but within reason. They were more than happy to talk with us, but our concept was we wanted someone local that has done some churches, just partly based on the size. When we were going to have to start paying travel costs for them moving from the Twin Cities, and we wanted someone that understood churches, but yet we didn't necessarily want to be looking at a global where they're looking to build $5 and $10 and $20 million buildings, and so we got away from it. But we did talk to them. Mark had some great conversations to get some feedback from them, looking at that option. We got.
I'm
Jen?
assuming there's no.
Mark. Yeah, go ahead.
I'm assuming there's no basement. Is that right?
Correct. No
Okay.
basement, just a slab.
Okay. Well,
Yeah, I mean-
I think this is absolutely beautiful, and I literally just about had tears streaming down my face because I'm so excited for us getting a home. And it's not everything we wanted, but I think it's perfect. And just as we've been talking in Life Group, that we need to pray for what God has in store for us. This is simple and authentic, and we'll grow, but we're not going to get everything we want right now. And I just think it's absolutely perfect. Yeah. So thank you guys. It's just beautiful. I'm so excited.
Well, and thank you for that. As we said, I don't know that anybody, I'm kind of kidded about it. If somebody could help us with that 1/3 check right now, this is pretty feasible. We know that this is a journey and a process that we're going to have to take. Part of the question and what we're excited about, and to hear some of those comments, is good feedback of, I went back to that first slide early on, you got it here. Is the floor plan realistic? Do we have the areas covered that we absolutely have to have? I mean, Terry asked, what about a youth group space? Are the spaces going to work? If they aren't going to work, we need to adjust that. Is the style realistic or acceptable? Terry, you asked about a barn. I'd love to worship in a barn. Does that make sense? Is it feasible for construction? Is that what people coming to Prairie Bible Church want? Again, it doesn't necessarily matter what we want, but it's who else is going to come in the next year, in the next 10 years, in the next 20 years. And we at least got the style that it's appropriate and welcoming and God-loving for that way. Those are kind of the questions we really want to show and share and have discussion about today and moving forward to make sure that we're at least on the right path of this journey where God wants us and that we don't need to vary a little bit. But with that saying, I'm going to keep more questions. Bill up here, and then we'll go to the back. Yeah.
Is this on? Yep. Okay, I have two specific questions about the building. I saw in there in your cost projections a bunch of money in there for shingles. And what I've seen for shingles recently, they're garbage. They don't last 15 years. And why aren't we looking at a metal roof?
Great question. And those are all questions that the short answer is we have.
Okay.
We priced it with asphalt for now.
Okay.
There's alternates for metal. It was, I don't remember, I'm going to say it was 3 times.
It was $121,000 to additional
Additional to go
put
on
on
the
a metal roof.
Well, and I think that those are very good questions.
Yep.
We will before we would do anything, we would consider that a little bit more. Part of the question is, we were going to have to be careful, at least in my humble opinion, is we can't do everything that's going to be the best and the highest quality, or we'll be waiting 10 years to build it, and it's going to be a compromise of realistic or not. The shingles is a great one, though, that we do need to consider and talk about, and we're looking at it as possibilities. But that's one.
My other question is, could we build the outside shell of the building and then get volunteers from within the church to help build interior spaces? Because we work cheaper than Rinderneck or anybody else. And I think we've got some pretty good carpenters in this building, or in this church family, and I would love to see us have some sweat equity.
Totally agree. It's been talked about a little bit. I think we should talk about it more as we move forward. The idea being, first of all, one of the people on our building review committee, I don't know if everyone knows him, but Rocky Zahn, who's on the building review, retired from Rinderneck. He worked for Rinderneck as a carpenter, master carpenter for, I don't want to date him, so I'm going to say at least 20 years, probably longer than that. He would love to help with that as well. Now, did I do that? Okay, thank you. One thing I will point out, and it's a great point, but if you look at this, we've got a 70-foot wide by 120-foot long building. There's one wall in the middle that the architect has told us basically you need for construction, for strength and stability so that the building doesn't go psh. And then we got the bathrooms at the bottom left. Then we've got 3 classrooms at the top, or 3 rooms. My point being, we probably can't do the bathrooms, or shouldn't. They would want to do that and have a plumber do those things. Otherwise, there isn't that much build-out. That doesn't mean that we couldn't do some of that build-out, but we're going to have to think about that. It's not like we've got a lot of interior rooms and a lot of interior spaces. And then so that's definitely on the table for discussion and will be. How much, we don't know. Yes?
Just have it might be a little off the subject. You have a sound booth, which looks like it's in the back of the sanctuary. How extensive is that going to be? You have any plans as using this site as a concert venue?
That's a great question. I'm going to hit on it one real quick, and then I'll turn it over to our AV guru, Mark. First of all, when it just comes to what type of space it is, we maybe have talked about in the past. Generally speaking, and again, Solomon Lang's done quite a few churches, they basically say that right now there are basically 2 different styles of sanctuary space. One is naturally lit open space, which is kind of what they've done for us. The other is what they, in a good way, affectionately call the black box, where there's no windows, and the space is all enclosed and black, and therefore then you can control all the lighting and all the AV with sound and lights for more concert style. We've shifted, at least from styles and our belief here, to more of the natural lit spaces. Doesn't mean that we will still want to try to control sound and light, but understandable, it's going to be less concert theater style than if we were to go to a black box. Mark,
Well, I just want to thank you, Kimberly, for asking that question. I really didn't plan it. So if you know, I love AV and electronics and music. So we have talked about, one of the comments we got back from our review board is cutting down some of the windows that are in the sanctuary. We're also talking with the architects about, could we block out some of the windows economically so that we could control the lighting better in there. Right now in the budget, we've got a pretty basic AV cost. We'll actually obviously have to have some additional projectors for the front and some new sound equipment, but we're planning to still use the speakers and the systems, which are pretty high-end. So we have a lot of the elements for that, and so I don't think there's anything we're doing that would preclude us from having a concert in there. The other thing we didn't mention, but if you kind of look on this, kind of about 10 foot up, you see kind of a different color material there. That's actually what they call tectum, and it's a sound-absorbing material. And so that's on the walls as well as on all the ceiling, because we visited, 6 churches, Tom, something like that, and almost every one of them mentioned the issues they had with acoustics. That when they got in there, they found out there was a lot of echoing, it was hard to understand. So we were putting a lot of thought and effort and, in some places, cost into ensuring that we got a space that when we build it, will be great from an acoustic standpoint.
We had another, Jim's got a
Tom,
question. Yeah.
just throw this out, it probably won't work, but I've got a neighbor that drives for Kroll Concrete, And he was telling me they come back of a night, and he said they dumped 10 yards the other night because they had no place to go with it. And they have people that, if they work there or such, that they will just take it to their place and dump it out. Whether we're close, whether it'd work, I don't know. But it might save us some money. They might give us a deal.
Yeah, I think at some point, that's a great point, Jim. It's good to know that. There's no good time, there's no great time to do this, but I'm going to just reiterate, in case you have other questions that you think about today, you think about some connection. Mark and I, Linda, if you could stand up, and Eric, if you could stand up, the four of us are on the building steering committee, so if you have other thoughts, other questions, feel free to reach out to any of us with stuff like that too. Thanks, guys. And I will also mention that we will go to every potential contractor, whether it be a situation like that or anyone else that's interested in doing the painting or the shingles or anything else, and ask them, share with them that we're doing this as a church and a nonprofit, and whether they would be willing to help us with a donation, an in-kind gift, et cetera, something like that. We'll do that for everybody too, but let us know as things come up with that. Emil?
I don't want to talk in.
Yeah, is there any way we can follow up on any other people? Like, I know Kevin Von Horn, he's been in contact with some of the Amishmen that would be willing to work with, help you draw up your plan and everything and put up the building. Couldn't we at least check into that and see what their costs would be compared to the cost of this building?
I think that's a great question. We are looking into that in a couple different ways. And the idea being we want to be sensitive of if we're going to be in the city, well, if we're going to be in any of the areas we're looking at, either in the city limits or right next to the city limits, hopefully there are city codes and city requirements that are extensive. If we can get a builder, whether it be Amish or any other style of builder that can do it significantly cheaper, we definitely want to do it. But there's a big difference between building what they call a building of assembly, meaning you have a group of people all together in a building in the city limits, versus a barn in the country. The codes and the expenses are drastically different, and what we can and can't do. And so it's not as easy as just going and putting up a pole building or a barn somewhere. But if they can even build the structure for us and the frame and reduce the cost, definitely something we're already looking into already and want to pursue, and I think it'd be really good. But don't know if that's an option. Kathy first? Go ahead.
Me first? Okay.
Yes.
Will you go back to the budget?
Mark?
Mark.
Over here.
Pay attention. You go back to the budget.
Wait,
This
one?
says that we're just going to look at service set, and a lot of that work, site work.
Great question.
Are we going to have that cost with the other place?
That's a great question. I'm glad you brought it up. I should have probably there. What we did is at some point, RenderNext said to us, it's tough to know. The most difficult thing for them to estimate is the site work or anything outside the building. The building is a little more independent, and they can get a little bit better cost there. But even when we pick a site, when you start digging in the dirt, underground, there's a lot of unknowns. And there's no way to know for sure. These are budgets. Hopefully, they are high budgets that can come down a little bit. But their comment to us was, it's tough enough variability there. Can we at least pick one site? Because we don't own land to figure the cost. So we said, let's go with the ServiceX site for a couple of reasons. The biggest one being, basically the big reason, utilities. And I can get into the really detail, but the most simple one is a septic tank. Because we can't hook into city sewer there's additional cost for the septic system. So our theory was, let's price it in budget for the more costly one. If we were to go to a site that had city sewer, you can just back that cost out pretty easy. A lot easier to take costs out than just to add cost. So that is just the site work as an example for that site, because it's the most costly one. Great question.
Because, say that 480 to 650. So we already know that the Metro Paver site may be more affordable. And so but we had, like Tom said, we had to pick a site for RenderNext to come up with some costs.
And Mark's getting here, the utility connection fee, the estimate of $100,000 is the septic system. It's also water, because we go back to the map, to get into some of the detail, these are both right across the street from each other. And the good news is the water runs right down the street, but the water runs on the Metro paver side. And there's an additional potentially $20,000 to get underneath the road with water. So that's another part of that cost, that if you're just on the right side of the street, the water hookup's easier. So those are a couple of factors there. That's why we price that out, again, be a little less if we were at a different site. Jim, and then Craig, can you get a mic to Terry?
This is just thrown out for information again, but they was talking about the Amish, and myself and 3 other houses in my neighborhood after we'd been hailed on. It ended up I had hired this Amish family or group out of Delhi. They came down and they put metal roofing on my house and everything, and it's beautiful, and everybody likes it out there, but it was over $5,000 cheaper for them to do it than a local contractor.
Nope. And that's why we're looking at it. And again, this is the first stage. Again, we kind of talk about this is the initial, this is where we're at. Now we start to dive into a little bit more, and we've already started those discussions with a couple other contractors and seeing what we can do and where can we start to save those and make that happen. Terry?
I thought of this when we started talking about Metro pavers, but has the architect even thought about looking into permeable, instead of concrete?
Permeable pavers.
Yes. Has that been looked into?
Yes. Technically not the architect as much as the civil engineer. We're working with a civil engineer, Schnorr Bonifazi. His job is basically to do everything outside the building. Not only the parking lot, but also the detention basin to hold water runoff. As any construction site in Cedar Rapids, any water that falls in the site, we're required to collect it, not just let it run off. So those are things we do. And part of that is dictated by the city. For instance, and we don't have that now, but he's done even the parking lot that you saw on the fly-through. There's about 90 spots, I believe, in that parking lot. Believe it or not, the city has a requirement that you can only have so many spots. You can't put in more parking spots. You have to have, there's a minimum and a maximum that you can have. And the reason that they want the minimum is they want you to have enough spots, you're not parking on the street. The maximum is because they don't want a large amount of concrete, then all of a sudden all the water's running off. They want you to be able to absorb the water. Part of that is then you can put in what's called permeable pavers. They're little patio paver stones with stone in between it. The water soaks down through them, goes in between them, and goes down as opposed to just running off like on concrete. At a minimum already, we're looking at being required to put in at least part of the parking lot being permeable pavers because of the expanse of parking lot we would want, potentially. And generally speaking, the permeable pavers are costlier than concrete. So that ups the cost, unfortunately, because the pavers cost more.
There was a new street put in Ely, and I don't know if this would apply to a church, but I think there was state money that came in and helped with that.
Quite possible. I know we did landscaping for one, Cedar Rapids Bank and Trust downtown, put in a new parking lot and had a lot of it permeable, and they had a lot of grant money from the city too. So it's definitely at cost, but before you get any dollars donated though, it is more money. But if you can get it reduced, it could be great.
And the other thing, if you're looking at maximum spaces, maybe there's an advantage to going to the Servicec side. You're in the county now.
Kind of. The challenge with being in the county is if you get in the county and you're way out in the county, you deal with the county. But generally most, at least cities, and I think in Iowa, have what is affectionately called a halo rule. Anything 2 miles outside of the city limits gets jurisdiction within the city. Because the assumption is at some point or not, they will get into the city, they'll be annexed in. So the Servicec property, you can say, well, let's not deal with the city. Let's just go across the street. We're in the county, and we don't have to worry with the city. And the county says, great, we'll deal with you. Here's our codes. Here's the problems you got to follow. Here's what you got to do here. And the city's going to say, oh, yeah, but you're within 2 miles. Here's our codes, and here's our problems. And the problem is they aren't the same. So now we're dealing with 2 sets of requirements and certifications. It doesn't mean it can't be done. Doesn't mean it maybe shouldn't be done. But it is another factor that we then work with county and city, not just one or the other. But that's a factor. Is there another question? Anybody got a mic right now? Or? Oh, yeah. Well, Craig loves to give you a mic.
One of the things, the sanctuary you've got planned is twice the size of what we're using now. There's no reason to think that the growth isn't going to be twice as big once we get a building like this. You have that kind of a growth in the community and the church, you're going to see funds come in. So even though this seems like a lot now, I think we've got to accept the fact we're building a sanctuary twice as big, available to room, because we expect and we'll have this budget increase. It'll happen.
Well, that's a great point, Larry. And we've got 130 chairs set up today. And it wasn't every chair full, but there was a lot of chairs here full. I'll remind everyone that Easter and last Christmas Eve, I'm fairly confident we were over 200 people. We've got room for 250 chairs there, but we had services were already 200 plus in this last year. And let's not forget, basically, maybe next week we almost celebrate our 2-year anniversary. We've only been around 2 years. So your point's well taken, Larry, and it's a real tough question the Building Steering Committee's really wrestled with of how much space is Prairie Bible Church supposed to have? How many people are we supposed to be holding for? One of the big things we heard at March was we love having one service. And at some point, we've got to have enough space to be able to have one service. Lord willing, if God really has a plan that this is going to happen, Larry, and people are going to come, we're going to have space concerns here, and we'll end up with 2 services. And hopefully nobody throws me out when I say that, but that'd be a great problem to have, wouldn't it? And so it's a really delicate balance of what's big enough now, knowing that we maybe then go to a couple services and then potential expansion after that. But that's a great problem to have. Is there another question? Then Mark, Sally.
I just had a question about the amount of land that was described there.
Mm-hmm.
On the Servicec property, the numbers were based on 5 acres of land.
Yes.
And I was thinking that an earlier slide, you had 8 and 10 acres as the 2 different spots. So does that raise the cost of that Servicec property building?
It's a great question. And as part of it is through our process, some of those numbers have changed as we go. What we are suggesting, and it's been talked about different times, of how much do we try to purchase as a church versus how much we're actually going to use. The short answer is right now we're suggesting we would try to purchase 8 acres for Metro Pavers. That would kind of be what we think is a nice size to have long term. The additional 2 acres at Servicec is for the septic system, to have leach fields. Hopefully it's not a full 2 acres, but just in round numbers right now. The 5-acre site work cost was because the civil engineer basically has a sketch drawn up for us with the building as shown, and the parking lot and the detention basin, and that effectively is about 5 acres. So for instance, if we were to buy Metro Pavers at 8 acres, we're probably going to use a strong 4 to maybe 5 of that total 8. The remaining, we would figure out whether we put it into a hayfield, we try to have a farmer rent it for crops, et cetera, like that. So there wouldn't be any additional site work costs for that few acres. We've also had a lot of discussions, and we haven't purchased anything. Part of the reason we haven't is, do we buy 8 acres now, or do we try to just buy 4 or 5 acres with the idea that we could buy more later? Those are all good discussions, and that's a way to save a little bit of money. The concern is, would it still be there in 3 years, 5 years, 10 years? And so if we could just get the 8, would that be enough and sufficient? But did that answer your question of the differences that we
No, the difference between these two, Metro is 8 acres, Servicec is 10, and the only reason why we go 10 on Servicec is because we need the extra 2 for the septic. So that would be either way. That's the only difference between the two.
that I had 5 on? Mm-hmm.
You buy that 8 acres, let's say, at Metro, does the dirt work and that 372 go up?
No. And is that the question, Darlene? If we buy 8 acres, does our site work go from $700,000 to $1 million? The shorter answer would be, I don't think so. No, because we're going to just develop 5 acres. That's what the cost is. If we buy 20 acres, we're going to have the cost of the bare land, but the site work should be pretty close to that because we're only going to put a parking lot and a building that would be on about 5 acres. Thanks for clarifying, Randy. Other questions? Sally?
I know. Is this on?
Yes.
Yeah. I noticed there wasn't a designated area for kitchen. If we start having weddings, funerals, gatherings, is there some way that could be added in, or I know there's where the gathering area is, there it looks like there's a coffee bar type area there.
Mm-hmm.
But
Yes.
is there a refrigerator? You know, I just was
Good
thinking
questions.
of future.
Francis, what's your address? Francis, what's your address? What's your home address? Okay, 255 Lily Pond Road. That's Prairie Bible Church's kitchen. We'll haul the stuff up once we make it in Jolene's kitchen, and we'll bring it up, okay? Hold on.
People are very proud of me that I said we served. Is this on? Yes. Anyway, if you have a coffee bar and a place for food, really, it works out just fine. People bring the food in, and it worked fine. We had a sink and a counter, and we served a wonderful, wonderful meal for a funeral luncheon at a funeral home. So, weddings, most people don't. They all go to a venue somewhere. I'm saying it could work. If we had to have a little refrigerator, we could put it in a mechanical room or something. But I think we can make it work until we have money for a kitchen. I have pictures of the dream kitchen. It's not real expensive. Cupboards are from Menards and so forth of a church. Francis and I visited just recently in southern Iowa. Not as nice as this, just a basic building. I mean, it was wood and so forth, and they're making it work. You know, you just do. You really do, step by step, as the money comes and as.
And so the short answer is right now, not much more than that. Now,
Yeah.
is in that bar, is there what I would call a dorm fridge? Probably for sure, I would
Yeah.
assume. Is there maybe a microwave? Why not? And a sink. Those are pretty easy. Is there a stove and an oven and a full dishwasher?
Yeah.
Probably not.
But you really don't need it. It is amazing what you can do. I had Hy-Vee make the sandwiches. They brought them in, just in time. Granted, it was cold outside, so we could set some extra food outside, but
It's
it'll
possible.
work. It'll
Yeah,
work.
but that's where we're at in the first phase. Jan?
I just wanted to say that a large part of this budget, of this whole building tag, is for land. And I'm wondering if we have to be in this area right here, if we couldn't go somewhere where the price of the land was a little bit less and save money that way. Personally, I don't think we can afford all of this.
Well, it's a great question. And it's a question that I think we all need to keep asking. And today's sermon is just kind of helps set the stage for, if this budget had come in at $2 million and we just kept plowing forward, would we be doing what God wants, or would we be doing what we thought was right and what we were going for? And it's a chance for us all to pause and reflect on everything, on the land, on the site work, on the building, and ultimately just on the purpose. What are we trying to accomplish? Are we trying to build a building for us, or are we trying to build a home for God to come into? Now, I'm going to answer specifically, at least perspective-wise, on the land. It's a question we asked 9 months ago. Where do we think God wants a church? Basically, from this point where we're all sitting today, there's not a church within 5 miles radius, any direction. Does that mean we need to be here? Maybe not. Does that mean we're supposed to be here? Maybe. That's what we got to figure out. Unfortunately, there isn't land within at least a 2-mile radius of this to 4-mile radius this that is going to be cheap, because we're right by 380. and the airport and Highway 30 and Kirkwood. So we're going to get the double edge. This is maybe a spot that needs it, but it's also a spot that's expensive. From a strictly functional standpoint, I'm going to go back to that city code and the planning phase aspect. When you're building a building for assembly, technically you're going to put groups of people, 100 people or more in a space at one time. There are certain codes that get extended. For instance, a sprinkler system. We have to have an automatic sprinkler system. If you look in here really close, you can't hardly see it because they're white, but there's pipes in here. The fire hits, sets it off. Not to get too technical, but to be simple, a basic well, we could put in a basic well for a home or business out in the country, buy land for $15,000 an acre and put in a simple well. But we cannot facilitate a sprinkler system with that easily. So therefore, then you have to have 10, 20,000 gallon water tanks to store water for your sprinkler system. We toured a church in Mount Vernon. Mackenzie Grimm, who sings for us, her dad attends Mount Vernon Bible Church. They brought us in for a tour. They have that. They had to put an addition on. They've got tanks, and they have to be inside because they can't freeze. They've got humongous tanks holding water and piping and valves, etc. So now all of a sudden you're spending literally more than hundreds of thousands of dollars for water issues but you went out of town away from the city water line to save money, and then you end up spending more money on that. So we need to think about that. I don't think that we should just say we have to be here, in my humble opinion, personally. But that's one of the factors that gets weighed into it. We've got to have water line there to be able to function that way too.
I would just like to say one thing, that if you listen to the sermon this morning, we all need to be in prayer, in deep prayer, saying, God, it's you that we need to build this where you want it, where we will grow.
Well, I've said a few times, and I truly believe this, that it's a process. What we've got here is a great first step. I mean, you couldn't see everybody's reactions, but it sure looked like overall the style and the basic look, we're on the right track. Now we need to adjust. Now we need to look and say, okay, we've got the style, we're moving in the right direction. How do we move from here? What can we do? And we've got a couple things in here. I maybe should hit that. And then I'll get right to you, Shannon, sorry. Where are we now that we've had some discussions? We've got this, we've made a lot of progress in the last 6 to 9 months. And I've talked to other friends at other churches, to our architects who, again, have worked with multiple churches, and they said, we've never had anybody get from where you were to where you are now this quickly. And then you add into the fact that we aren't even 2 years old. We've had some incredible discussions, some purpose, some part. We've learned a lot. We've got some good potential designs and styles. Now, what's our next step? And where do we take that? What do we do with that? And what we're looking at is, how do we redesign this, tweak this a little bit to get this back down in cost? What are some things that we could do without, whether it be style or function, and how do we make that happen? And I've even got in parentheses there's no additional cost. I mean, this is not like, well, we paid the architect for this, and now we got to go over here. It's not that at all. They're still working with us, the same basic fee to do this, to get us this initial cost, that we can take it to that next step and get it closer. And we continue to look at other land, other potentials. I mean, Jan said, should we be here? Well, that's a good question, and we want to consider all those options. But again, we don't want to just do it from a money standpoint. We want to do it from a purpose standpoint and why we're doing this. And we don't want to completely rule out all options around the table yet of, is there an existing building that we could take and renovate and adjust? It's all legitimate. We just need to continue to look for it, pray about it, and ask where it's going to go. And ultimately know that, I keep kidding about this, but it's going to take some money. And we can get this budget at $4 million, we can put this budget at $2 million. Ultimately, none of that matters until we see where God's going to lead the finances as well amongst us, and that's going to be a big part of it. And so at some point, as we get closer here, we all need to be thinking about where we can commit and how we can do that to help fund this and support this. And some of those decisions will come down to that as well. And the admin board is going to continue to kind of make the final decisions of what direction we should and shouldn't go with the building review committee's suggestions. Okay, but that's kind of the next steps that we just need to keep all options open and as we're going through this process and journey. Shannon?
I agree with Ron. Prairie Bible Church has obviously been crazy blessed by God this whole time, or we would not be where we're at in 2 years. What's happening among us is amazing, and God's in charge of all of it. And I think there's been so many hours of work, and it's been led by prayer, I know, and it's been led by prayers for discernment amongst these committees, and God's leading this. So where we are right now is because he's closed some doors and he's opened some other ones. And it's not been just the human element. God is in all of this. And as we go forward, he's going to open the doors that are supposed to be open, and he's going to close the ones that are supposed to be closed. And this book that we're reading, we all need to be in fervent prayer every single day so that we can discern where we're supposed to go. And I hope we take that home and literally do just that. It's not just a book, it's not just words, but we need to literally pray to discern where he's got us going. And I hope everybody does that. I don't think we need to be anxious about this. I think the money's going to come in, and he's going to lead it because it's obvious he wants us to grow. And this is where he wants us to be right now.
Great.
I just want to say that the construction design is absolutely beautiful. It's simple, authentic, and it's us. And I want to thank you for all the work that you've put into this. And I know that you're going by God's direction. Thank you.
Thank you. And again, it's Linda and Eric and Mark and I have sat in on the meetings, the building review committee's involved. The beautiful part, in my opinion, is this is not 2 or 3 people putting this together. This is a whole church. That's why we have these church meetings. That's why we can have these open and honest discussions. And I know that not everybody has the exact same opinions, and that's okay because we're all in this together. And I think that's one of the beautiful things is the transparency and the openness and the willingness to try to look past some individual challenges to say this is what's good for God's church right now. And that's why it's still exciting, and it really is just another step to the finish line of where we're going here. And it's a constant journey. Any other questions, thoughts? This is not the end by any means. Again, this is sharing where we're at today, what we're doing. I don't want to mean that we're done with questions, but if there's any immediate questions now. It's not the end, but we're almost to the beginning. It's just a constant journey. Again, if you have other thoughts, please reach out to any of us on the steering committee and a review committee and the admin board, and we keep talking about where we're at and what we're going to do next. Do you want to close with a prayer?
Sure.
Please.
Let's pray. Lord, how exciting. I thank you for every circumstance that has presented itself and for the circumstance that will present themselves in the future, because each one of those situations is you with your hand upon us, guiding and directing, answering a prayer. You're speaking to us. May we never forget, Jesus, that all of this, that it's about the gospel, that any building that we might build is about the ability to more effectively be the church, to be Jesus to the world. May we never forget that ultimately it's not about a building at all. It's about ministry opportunities that we have to be the hands and the feet of our Savior. As we keep those things in mind, as we fervently seek after you in prayer and submit ourselves to you as Lord, we can trust and believe that it's nothing but good, and it's going to be great because of you. We pray these things in Jesus' name. And everybody said, Amen. Amen.